Well, the reason I say starting a company is like eating glass and staring at the abyss is that in order to make a company successful, it requires doing a lot of painful work that is not fun, working very long hours, and then maybe your company survives, maybe it does not. And the vast majority of startups fail. So that's why, that's the eating glass and staring at the abyss is starting a company. Lots of hard work followed by death is usually what happens when people start companies. That's why I say if people need words of encouragement to start a company, they should not start a company. With respect to government, there's really the challenge is overcoming bureaucracy. And I think bureaucracy is perhaps I'd say the penultimate boss battle. The ultimate boss battle is defeating entropy, which physics tells us we cannot defeat entropy. The second hardest battle is defeating bureaucracy. But that's how difficult it is to improve government. Now, one of the things that's happened, which always happens with an extended period of peacetime, is that you have a steady increase in the amount of bureaucracy. The size of government grows. The laws and regulations that are put in place get larger every year. So it stands to reason that if you have regulators are going to add more regulations every year. Lawmakers will add more laws every year. The cleansing process normally for getting rid of nonsensical laws and regulations is war. Now, obviously, we'd prefer to not have war drive the reformation of government. So in the absence of war, you have to have something like what we have formed here in the U.S., a Department of Government Efficiency, in order to get rid of laws and regulations. Well, with laws, we have to require, obviously, the consent of Congress. But for regulations, this can be done at the executive branch level, is to re-examine the vast body of regulations and get rid of those where there's more harm than good, of which there are many. And then reducing the size of the government, and then also balancing the budget so that we are not driving the country into bankruptcy. These things are all very hard, and I want to be clear, like we may indeed fail in this objective. That's why I described it as an extremely difficult battle. This has never succeeded before. So prior attempts to reduce the size of bureaucracy, to make government more efficient, have generally failed. Even when parties are elected for that. So if you take, say, Reagan, he campaigned on getting rid of the Federal Department of Education and having that be done at the state level. And the Department of Education at the federal level is a recent creation. It was, I think, created about 45 years ago or something like that.
Mr. Musk, you're also very familiar with the German economy and the German market. So would you recommend a Department of Government Efficiency for Germany too?
I would. I think generally for governments, that you basically need to have some process for trash collection, garbage collection. So if you only have a process for creating regulations, but no process for deleting regulations, eventually everything is illegal and nothing is allowed to happen, and progress comes to a grinding halt. So it's very important, I think, that all governments have a team that's responsible for reducing the size of government and for getting rid of regulations that may have made sense at one time, but no longer make sense currently, and simplifying the process. Otherwise, you get these things build up like plaque on arteries. Like you start having the sort of the flow of blood through the government get constricted with more and more build up on the walls of the arteries. So you must have this cleansing process, very important. Well, I think President Trump likes to get things done, and he's not looking to punish countries or to do things that are economically insane. But he does view tariffs as a means to gain cooperation of countries for important matters. And obviously, if countries have implemented asymmetric tariffs where they are taxing the import of American goods while America does not tax the import of their goods, then we have an imbalance. So what I suspect you will see is that President Trump will be will want to, for countries that have asymmetric tariff barriers, and it could be either tariff or regulatory barriers that which are basically any restraint of trade, then the President Trump will want to take action to stop the restraint of trade and ensure that there is a fair and level playing field for American companies and companies in Europe or China or wherever the case may be. So that's my guess. My sense of it is that there needs to be. He's simply looking for a fair and level playing field. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think actually Tesla would have existed without, if the AfD hadn't been in power, we would still have put the factory in Berlin. I'm generally against government incentives that distort markets, and there tends to be a lot of government tariffs and incentives and penalties that distort markets. So that's now if those things are put in place by others, then we obviously must take advantage of them, or Tesla is at a competitive disadvantage. But the reason that I'm in favor of AfD is that there's some fundamental things that must happen without which I'm concerned that Germany will fail, which is that there have to be sensible controls on immigration. There has to be if there are criminals in Germany who are committing crimes and hurting people in Germany, they must be deported, and that's not happening. Then there must also be freedom of speech such that the people know what the truth is. Otherwise, they cannot make an informed decision. So if you do not have freedom of speech, you cannot be a democracy, because the public cannot make an informed decision about their vote if there is not freedom of information. So in Germany right now, there are draconian rules against freedom of expression, where even insulting a politician can get you prison time, which is insane. So I like the fact that the AfD is in favor of freedom of speech. I like that the AfD is in favor of sensible immigration policies and deportation of criminals. And I like the generally libertarian policies of the AfD. Well, it is obviously easy to strawman my statement, which is what he's done, to say that that we should flip from entirely where we sort of torture young children in Germany with nothing but guilt, to saying, oh, we should completely ignore the sins of Nazi Germany. I've said obviously neither of those things. What I've said is that we should not be torturing children in Germany and telling them that Germany is the worst country in the world, and that is all they are taught. And they are taught nothing about, the great things that Germany has done in the past, and Germany cannot be defined, and children whose great grandparents may not have even been Nazis are told that Germany is the worst country that has ever existed on the face of the earth, and they must live with nothing but guilt and shame. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is not what I'm not saying is that Nazism should be ignored. I've never said that. But I am saying that the tremendous cultural history of Germany is incredible. If you think of the great philosophers, the great composers, the incredible contributions in terms of engineering and science that Germany has made, including for those of Jewish people in Germany, who have, Einstein, good example. These things should be celebrated, not to the exclusion of Nazism, not to ignore it, but not to say that this is all Germany is about is absurd and false.
Okay.
And so people should be proud of the great things that Germany has done, proud of that Germany is an ancient nation, thousands of years old, that was one of the few nations to actually resist incorporation into the Roman Empire. So you go back 2,000 years ago, even Rome could not defeat Germany. Rome was the most powerful empire in the world at the time, but could not defeat Germany. They gave up. So one simply needs to understand the full context of German history, the great things as well as the terrible things. And you know, when you look at, say, America, like what happened to the native people of America? Where are they? What happened to the native people of Judea before the Jewish people got there? Where are they? So at some point, things cannot be simply about terrible things that have been done. The terrible things must be learned, but also the good things. Well, I mean, this is simply, I mean, that's you know, we're going from like deep philosophical and political issues to trivia of the week. This is there are a lot of very smart, very motivated engineers in China. So you should expect that China will come up with many great things, and they have come up with many great things. Again, look at and if one looks at the long history of China, also an ancient nation that has invented and developed many things, and for most of actually human history, China has been the most powerful nation on earth. So, you know, I think particularly from, say, the position of people in China, they simply view China's ascendancy as resuming the normal sort of place in history, which is the most powerful country on earth. And so you can expect that they will do many great things, DeepSeek being one of them. But that is simply a result of the immense amount of talent in China. That is very impressive. But it's not. Is it some sort of complete revolution in AI? No, it is not. The XAI and others will soon be releasing models that are better than DeepSeek. Well, as you know, Europe actually has more bureaucracy than. Wait, can you guys look? Okay, connection still looks good. Europe actually has more bureaucracy than the US does, because you don't just have the provincial and sort of national level, you also have the EU on top of that. And to be totally frank, EU headquarters in Brussels is essentially a giant cathedral to bureaucracy. So if one wishes to visit the Grand Cathedral of bureaucracy, visit EU headquarters in Brussels. I do think that Europe probably needs government efficiency more than the US does, and this needs to happen at the country level and at the EU level. And actually, I think the job is more difficult in Europe than it is in the US. You know, I think overregulation has inhibited a tremendous amount of progress and innovation in Europe. And if the I call it the sort of the slow strangulation by overregulation, because it's a slow strangulation because it's not like at any one moment you feel like this is it, but the noose around the neck just gets a little tighter every year, and eventually you know, it's going to kill Europe. So there must be, in my opinion, immediate action to reduce regulation at the EU level, at the country level, and at the local level. Well, I think we'll see that open source models generally lag the commercial models. So whatever is commercially powerful today will probably be open source in a year or less. And I expect that trend to continue. So essentially, everyone will have AI.
Do you see?
In fact, this is maybe the most profound change. The advent of digital superintelligence. If you stand back and say, like, from 1,000 years ago, sorry, 1,000 years from now, what will historians, well, assuming they're even human at that point, not computers, what will historians regard as the most important thing, or the most important milestones in history? One of those fundamental milestones will be the advent of digital superintelligence, no question. They will long ago have forgotten who's in charge of which country, or that will be minor by comparison with the advent of digital superintelligence. I think also the humanity becoming a multi-planet civilization would also fit on that list, because I think that fits on the list. I mean, one could say, like, looking at from a very broad standpoint, of a very high level, look at, say, what are milestones that would perhaps be in the top 10 from it, and from the general standpoint of evolution in general. You'd say, like, there would be single-celled life, multicellular life, differentiation into plants and animals, life going from ocean to land, mammals, cognitive function in mammals, that's like humans. Then also, then it would be life becoming multiplanetary, and digital superintelligence would fit on that, essentially top 10 list. I mean, with great difficulty. It is quite a challenge. Our brain only consumes 20 watts of power, and of that, only about half of that is higher brain function. So I've got basically a 10-watt meat computer to do all this, and I find this all to be very challenging for my 10-watt meat computer that is my brain. One thing that I think is helpful, though, is there's a big difference between training, how much mental workload training to do something takes, versus inference or executing that thing. So you could take, like, let's say, chess as an example. It might take, for argument's sake, 10,000 hours to become a grandmaster at chess, but then you can play the game in a few hours. So that's sort of what has happened here with, say, Tesla and SpaceX, is that I have really way more than 10,000 hours into understanding how to build and grow a car company and a rocket company, and satellites and all these things. I also, before SpaceX, was a co-founder of two internet companies, so I understand the internet, I understand payments and all that kind of thing. And so the mental workload required once you have trained on something is very low compared to the training itself. That is how I'm able to do things that required immense amounts of training over decades, but do not require much mental workload once the training is completed. Now, right now, for government, although I've interfaced with government tremendously, this is my first time actually trying to improve government. So there will be some initial training workload that is significant, and then we'll move to inference, which is several orders of magnitude easier than training. I've not put in a bid for TikTok, and I don't have any plans for what would I do if I had TikTok. I mean, I guess I would look at the algorithm and try to decide, how harmful or useful is this algorithm, and what can we do to shift the algorithm to be more productive, and ultimately be beneficial to humanity. We should just generally lean in the direction of something which is more beneficial than more harmful. I don't use TikTok personally, so I'm not that familiar with it. I've just seen, just see the videos occasionally appearing on X, or people show me something. But I'm not chomping at the bit to acquire TikTok. I don't know acquire companies in general. It's quite rare. Acquiring Twitter now called X, was highly unusual. I usually build companies from scratch, and the reason I acquired Twitter, which is what I said at the time, which is that it was important to preserve freedom of speech in America and to the extent we are legally allowed to in the rest of the world. I felt like acquiring Twitter would be an important, productive step for the future of humanity. And even though it's really quite painful and has been very difficult, it was, I think, nonetheless important to do so. I don't know if the same logic applies to TikTok, but so I don't acquire things just for economic reasons, and so it's not clear to me what the purpose of acquiring TikTok would be apart from economics. Sure. Well, I generally regard these movements as positive. And this whole definition of what is right, what is sort of a right wing, what is left wing, this whole thing has shifted over time. Policies like simply having sensible immigration and sensible government spending those used to be. In fact, people on the left used to have those opinions as well, and the centrist government certainly had those opinions. So what we've seen in the media is a defining things that used to be centrist to center left, such as a sensible immigration policy, as somehow far right, which is absurd and false, because really far right should refer to extremely fascist situations. Like far right should refer to electing regimes that want to launch wars or genocides or something like that. That's what that far right is supposed to mean. Far right is not supposed to mean a sensible immigration policy. That literally, if you took speeches from politicians that were center-left and just go take their speeches from 10, 15 years ago, they were literally saying the same thing. So what we've seen is really a drift left to hesitate to use the same modifier, but where a lot of governments actually are far left, but think they are centrist, or think they are merely left or centrist, but they are actually far left compared to what the left was even 10 or 15 years ago. You can take speeches that Obama or Hillary Clinton gave about immigration, and they sound identical to President Trump. And that's just as of 10, 15 years ago, not that long ago. So I think what we've seen is a redefinition of what is right and left, but an inaccurate redefinition. And frankly, it's just propaganda, because people generally have the association that, well, anything far right must be bad. So then we're going to just label things that are common sense far right, which is absurd. Now, I'm a big fan of President Milei. He's doing a fantastic job in Argentina. The results speak for themselves. Argentina is experiencing unprecedented growth. He has inflation under control, finally. He has reduced the size of government dramatically. And reducing the size of government is very important, because you need to move people from low to negative productivity roles in the government sector to high productivity roles in the private sector. This is what actually results at a fundamental level in economic improvement. If you move people from low to negative productivity roles to high productivity roles, then the output of goods and services increases and the standard of living increases. This is leaving aside, because sometimes people get caught up in they think money is real, but money is not real. Output of goods and services is real. Money is simply a representation of that. Yes, well, let's just define what is meant here. I mean, if by wokeism one means just like racism on the basis of sex and gender and other matters, which DEI is simply racism rebranded, then yes, I'm against racism and sexism, no matter who it's directed against. It is entirely possible to be racist against white people or black people or Asians or anyone else, and we should really accept no racism or sexism in any form, no matter what it's called. DEI and wokeism essentially advocate racism and sexism. That is wrong. They're also anti-meritocratic. So we should really, in my view, have a meritocratic society where people succeed as a function of their abilities and how hard they work. That should be the only way that people succeed, not through some arbitrary measures that are discriminatory. So we need a meritocratic society, and we need freedom of speech. And freedom of speech is only relevant if people are allowed, if people you don't like are allowed to say things you don't like. That is the only time freedom of speech is relevant. It can't be that the government is deciding what is or is not misinformation or disinformation, because then you get politics applied to those labels, and in fact, you simply get the suppression of freedom of speech. So really, I think wokeism is evil because it is racist, sexist, and anti-free speech. Yeah, I mean it's very basic that if people stop having, if there are no babies, if people stop having babies, humanity will come to a halt. We've seen now for many years very low birth rates in almost all of the world. So even India recently went below replacement rate. So sometimes people will say, well, we'll just replace people with immigration. I'm like, immigration from where? If you look at China, for example, they are roughly at half replacement rate. I think maybe it's 60% or something like that. So that means, call it something like 600 million people will be lost of this generation. Where are you going to get 600 million immigrants? That would require almost 2 Americas to move to China. That's impossible. If you look at Korea, Korea has a replacement, the birth rate is now 1/3 replacement rate. That means in 3 generations, Korea, the size of the Korean population will be about 3 to 4% of what it currently is. And basically, Korea will disappear. And I think that there are great things in every culture. We don't want the German culture to disappear. We don't want French culture to disappear. We don't want Korean culture to disappear, or Japan, or America, or anywhere. I think it's good. This is part of why I'm like, I think we should be very cautious about having some sort of global mixing pot, because we will then not have, every place will be the same, and there won't be any unique cultures in the world, which I think would make the world worse. So I think we need to preserve these country cultures, and that's the future that I think is better. I think that most people would agree is better. We should not have cultures disappear. And currently, based on the current birth rates and the sort of so-called multiculturalism and globalism, what we're actually seeing is the dilution of individual cultures and the destruction and death of individual cultures, which I think is terrible for the future. Well, I think we are at an inflection point. So I would recommend, radical change in Europe that encourages a much higher birth rate. I think this may require some very dramatic incentives. I think Europe needs to have a sensible immigration policy, that where people are properly vetted before coming to Europe, and if they commit crimes, they are deported. Otherwise, you will have the destruction of Europe. Also, you have to have a significant effort in deregulation, and basically removal of laws and regulations, so that you do not get hardening of the arteries until basically it's illegal to do anything in Europe, which is what's basically happening now. So I'd recommend immediate and dramatic action for deregulation, freedom of speech, and sensible immigration, and improving the birth rate. If those things happen, Europe will have a good future, and if they do not, Europe will fail.
节目最后，如果本期资讯对你有所帮助，请您点赞、评论、订阅并打开小铃铛，这样您就不会错过本频道的最新内容。谢谢。